All right, thanks for joining us for this week's version or edition, I guess, of the Arkansas Broadband Leaders Network, ABLN. Um, we have a jam-packed program today, and so we'll get right into it. All right, our agenda, general updates as always, and then we're going to have a great presentation from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, or NDIA, specifically talking about the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. Okay, that's a main focus of today's discussion. So we'll try to get through the general updates from our office rather quickly. And so with that, we'll get right into it. Quickly, updates on BEAD and the BEAD program. Our Volume 2 document, or the Infrastructure Grant Plan, as we like to relay it, we are through our legal review stage. There was one note on curing that we had received from NTIA last week. It had to deal with some legal language that was in the document. Long story short, essentially we had some language in the document that talked about being able to hold back some BEAD funds from award winners in our program if our BEAD winner was also a winner in a different program, and for some reason they had to default in a different program. We could hold back some of the BEAD funds that we had awarded them to go build out to those locations that they had defaulted on. NTIA has said that was basically not allowable within the program due to statute and NOFO limitations, and so we had to take that small paragraph out, and we did, and sent it back to them very quickly. Just as an example, this thing has been delayed, I think, longer than anyone really expected. But we're not stopping. We're keeping our foot on the gas. We're still moving. For instance, yesterday we held an internal mock bidding scenario session where we ran through some game theory about how overlapping bids would interact with each other, order of operations and scores, and what that looks like. So even though this thing has been delayed a little bit, our office is still moving forward as fast as possible to be able to be ready to move forward as soon as we get the green light. So just want to give you our word on that. For our mapping challenge process results, Lane is going to have a little bit of additional information on this in a second, but we sent back our first round of curing to NTIA on Wednesday of this week. We went from about 113,000 locations that were BEAD eligible at the start of the challenge process to about 78,500. So it's a reduction of about 34,000 locations. And that is, of course, tentative and subject to approval by NTIA, but that's where we stand as of today. Quickly, here's our tentative BEAD timeline. We're estimating right now that round one would open second half of September and close first half of October. Our round two would open up probably second half of December through first half of January next year, and then fully complete ISP negotiations by first half of June. I do want to note for some folks who may be new on the call, the way that the state and the BEAD program has to be operated is much different from any of the other broadband grants that we've done before. Okay, so when we see round one, round two, that does not mean that we're going to go make awards in round one and bring them to the legislature for approval, and then go round two and then bring more grants for approval before the General Assembly. That's not how this one's going to work. That's how it's worked in the past. These all fit together. So we're going to have to run a round one and then run a round two, and there's some overlap. Some folks who were in round one may have to also participate in round two. The short story is that eventually, once this is completed, we're going to go to the legislature with one packet that has all of the grant awards for the entire state, okay, at one time, and this will all feed into that one packet. All right, so it's not going to be chopped up. We're going to deliver one packet of statewide grants all at the same time to the legislature once we get there, okay? All right, updates on stakeholder engagement. We're going to have what we're calling a BEAD 2-week blitz the last 2 weeks of this month, so the weeks of August 19th and 26th. We're going to have a Google registration form that will go out to everyone next week and allow people to register for as many of the meetings as they want to. In order to hit everyone over the course of the 2 weeks, we're going to group the counties by counts of 3 to 6. We're going to have them on Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday at 10, 3, and 7. We're trying to pick days and times that are most advantageous to most stakeholders and try to get as much participation in attendance as possible. That's why we've included a Saturday and a Friday, and even an evening session at 7. So in total, over the 2 weeks, 16 stops. It'll be focused on BEAD to get everyone ready at the local level for your role in the process. So we're going to go and talk about for local officials and stakeholders at the grassroots level what you can do as we get prepared for the BEAD infrastructure grants that will come out in the next couple of months. Okay. I don't think that you've seen this before. This is the groupings that we have. So we have the days and times and the groupings of the counties for you. I'm not going to go through all of these. For any new folks on the call, we send out an email communication following these calls with the slide deck that we presented and additional notes. And so you'll be able to see this in more detail in the communication that follows the presentation. But we have all the groupings for you, the times and locations, or at least the cities, and the days. And so you can look through this to get prepared for when we're going to be coming to your part of the state. And then you'll be able to start registering for these meetings starting next week using a Google form. Okay. All right, with that, we're going to go to Lane, our Deputy Director on staff, and have some updates from Lane this morning. Good morning, Lane.
Good morning, Glenn. Thanks. Quick update on the challenge process. We started the challenge process about 4 months ago. Arkansas has 1.3 million, just over 1.3 million broadband serviceable locations. We saw a lot of challenge participation. We went in with 113,000 locations designated as unserved or underserved. Had a lot of great challenges, adding locations that were unserved, underserved, removing locations. After all the adjudication, after everything was said and done, as you said, we're looking at 78,000 locations remaining that are unserved and underserved and have not already been touched with a federal or state funded grant program to reach them. So that's what we're looking at funding with BEAD program, provided, of course, it's got to be validated by the NDIA. And just as soon as that is validated and checked off and approved by the NDIA, we will roll out a new broadband map for the state that shows those locations. We'll try to use the color schemes that you're used to: green for funded, gray for served, pink and blue for unserved and underserved. But yeah, look for an updated map just as soon as we get NDIA approval. Otherwise, we're gonna stick with our pre-challenge map on our public website for now. We just don't. It just doesn't make sense to do an interim map when we're waiting for approval. So, a couple of housekeeping items. We're a small office and a very mobile office. We're always on the road. We're always moving around. We understand the frustration. It can be hard to get in touch with us. So we built a new hotline to make it a little bit easier to get in touch with us. It's 501-683-6000. That's 501-683-6000. You'll reach greeting and be allowed to leave a voicemail, and somebody will get back in touch with you within 24 business hours. That's three business days. Somebody will get back in touch with you either by way of email or a telephone call. That line is monitored by a distribution group. So multiple folks here in our office are monitoring that, and it's got backups. So we do understand we're always on the road, hard to reach us. So we wanted to put that out there. We're going to put it on our website. We're going to put it on our documentation. So 501-683-6000, new way to get in touch with us. Another housekeeping item is we are migrating to new email addresses here. You might have noticed our domain is always our first name dot last name at arkansasedc.com. Now, the history of that is because we were sort of dotted line embedded with the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. And so that's how they set up our emails when we first got started as a business unit within state government. We're sort of moving away from that, and so we're migrating to just our first name dot last name at arkansas.gov. And you're going to start to see as we push out, as we send you emails, you're going to notice they're going to start coming from arkansas.gov instead of that arkansasedc.com. It just makes more sense for us. There are benefits to using a .gov email address. So if you see that, just wanted to let you know so you're not confused why it's coming from a new email address. Not to worry. The edc.com domain, if you keep emailing that, it's going to continue working for several months. We'll accept emails from either address for quite a while. So nothing's going to break, but just wanted to give you a heads up. And we do ask you to go ahead, if you don't mind, when you send emails to us, if you can remember, go ahead and switch to that arkansas.gov. We sure would appreciate it. Help us go ahead and get that migration started. So yeah, we'd appreciate it. And with that, Glenn, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Lane. Very much appreciated. One of the things that we've touched on before with this group, but we may have more folks today on the call because we're giving a tutorial on the grant opportunity. One of the things that we were proud of in Arkansas was that, as Lane has said before, nearly half of the challenges that we received in the challenge process came from units of local government and nonprofit organizations. That's very different than most states out there. And so you should be, again, we've talked to this group before, you should be very proud of the effort that everyone on this call put into the challenge process, having nearly half coming from nonprofits and units of local government. That sticks out when you compare us to the region, even the country, as far as folks involved in the challenge process. So again, congratulations to all the hard work that everyone on the call did during the challenge process. Next, we'll have updates from the Digital Opportunity Manager. Just as a note, we'll go to the chat box when we get to the discussion portion of the presentation after NDIA does their piece. But for now, let's go to Cam. Good morning, Cam.
The highlight report that came out, I believe.
Cam, your audio's a little, there we go. Let's see.
Sorry about that, guys. I want to highlight the publication from the National Schools.
Cam, it's still a little.
Can't hear you at all.
Yeah, Cam, it's not coming through.
No.
Okay. What we'll do, I'll go through it real quick and circle back because we're a little bit time crunched. Do you want to test it again, Cam? Test it one more time.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Let's see if we can go forward.
Okay. So one highlight of publication that was done by the National Skills Coalition that was publicized earlier this week around a snapshot of the in-demand digital skills that are needed within the Arkansas state within the context of a national report that did a snapshot for the entire country. Pretty cool snapshot, gives a list of foundational skills that are in demand within the state, notates that 89% of our jobs need digital skills, and some other facts around their advocacy polling that shows Arkansans support gaining access to digital skills, which was lamented in our digital equity planning grant in our research process within that grant program. And so that gives a segue to an overview on the Arkansas Digital Skills and Opportunity Plan programming activities. Year one, just to highlight it before we get into the capacity grant, the competitive grant, which will complement our efforts. Our DISCO plan, we want to focus year one. They're going to come out in 3 tranches again. But year one, we're going to focus primarily on digital skill development. And so founding new programs and supporting existing ones. We're going to look to do a learn and earn model where the completers of that program or that curriculum will get access to a large screen device in some capacity after completion. And then in addition to those big programs, we're going to also look at 2 pilot programs at granting free access networks at community anchor institutions, as well as multi-dwelling units around the state, in addition to a couple of other things. And then as well, the NDIA, they're launching a webinar series around the competitive grant. There are around 8 scheduled events on the link in the slide that are going to start next week on August 7th, and they're going to roll pretty much all the way through September. If you guys are interested in the program, I suggest you join and learn, information share, and start the conversation here within the state. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right, Cam. Great job. Some good opportunities for folks to learn additional information about the competitive grant process, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. And before we get to it, with NDIA, I just wanted to set the table in context for everyone. So there were a couple of digital equity grant programs that essentially function as sister programs to the BEAD program. Okay, remember the BEAD side is infrastructure based, although we may probably have some non-deployment opportunities in Arkansas because of our allocation. But the sister programs to BEAD focused on more of digital opportunity efforts are the couple of programs on your screen today. One is the Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program. Okay, that's the one that our office is the state recipient and administrator for, and that's going to fund the plans and programs that are contained within our Digital Skills and Opportunity Plan. So because our office has come out with a DISCO plan and is receiving funding to execute it through the Capacity Grant Program, we are not eligible to apply for the Competitive Grant Program. Okay, and that's where we need you. So again, our office can't apply to the Competitive Grant Program. We need other organizations and entities in Arkansas to apply for this program on the state's behalf. Not our behalf, but for the benefit of the people, okay? And so today we're going to turn it over to NDIA in just a second, and they're going to go in more detail about the Competitive Grant Program, what that looks like, and hopefully have some very valuable information for everyone on the call today. So that's the context. We're responsible for one of the programs. We can't apply for the other one. We need your help, and it's a great opportunity to impact Arkansans. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Shauna Edson and Ryan Collins with NDIA. And team, take it away.
Morning, y'all. Thanks for having us. I'm Ryan. Shauna. You're muted.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shauna Edson. Great to be here.
We have a lot of information to cover, so we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen so y'all can see my slides. Perfect. Can everybody see those? Just want to make sure. Awesome.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So we're here today to talk about the Digital Equity Competitive Grant NOFO that was released by NDIA back on July 24th. So today's agenda, we're going to go over the Digital Equity Act programs, a quick overview and timeline, and then we're going to get real in-depth about the competitive grant NOFO, what you could do now to prepare, and if we have time at the end, we'll start doing a Q&A and collect some questions from y'all and see how many that we can get answered now or how many that we may need to send to NDIA to add as part of their FAQ. So Amy was unable to join us today because she has a conflicting schedule, but you can see there's Shauna and I. Little background about NDIA. So as the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, we advance digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We recently crossed the 1,800 mark for our affiliates, and we keep gaining more every day. All 50 states plus DC, American Samoa, and every U.S. territory, and 38 individual tribal entities are a part of our organization. And so I just want to do a quick overview of the Digital Equity Act funding. As I said, The DEA was authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which we'll refer to as the IIJA from now on in the presentation, back in 2021. The first set of those funds was the State Planning Grant Program, and that first award was made to Louisiana in August of 2022. And that grant period has ended, and all states have a digital equity plan and have been approved. Then was the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, of which all states have submitted their applications for that because they were due a couple months ago. But only one has been awarded to my knowledge still, which is Nevada. The rest are still waiting final approval. And then we have the competitive grant program, which began with the release of the NOFO on July 24th, though the portal for the applications does not open until mid-August. And so here we have the timeline for the Digital Equity Act. And so you can see there, it first passed in 2021, and then we jump a little forward to spring 2024, where all the digital equity plans were published. Then we have the competitive grant having opened on July 24th, those applications being due on the 23rd, and then going all the way to February 7th, 2025, where the Native Entities Capacity Grant Program applications are going to be due. And so then finally, just to get into the competitive grants, again, that NOFO was released on July 24th. Applications for states and native entities underneath that specific NOFO are due on September 23rd, 2024. As you saw in that timeline before, there is another date that native entities have a due date. That's if they're applying for the specific pot of funds that have to do with native entities. The September 23rd is applying for the pot of funds that has to do with the general fund. And then applications from U.S. territories for their pot are due by October 22nd. So the grant is competitive, just like we said. That means that not all applicants are going to be getting funded. And so this is what the funding kind of looks like. Congress originally allocated $1.25 billion for the competitive grant program. However, from that amount, there are set-asides for certain uses. Those set-asides include a 5% set-aside for NTIA, a 5% set-aside for tribal entities, and a 1% set-aside for territories. And that 5% set-aside is why you see that $750 million there rather than that $1.25 billion. And out of that $750 million, $37.5 million of it is available for the native entities, and $7.5 is available for U.S. territories. There's also a possibility for future funding. If the additional fund, there is an additional $250 million that may become available in October of this year. It all just has to do with the budget process. If that is approved, it would be funded underneath this NOFO, and so there would only be one future competitive grant NOFO. If it is not approved by October and it goes into 2025, there would need to be a separate NOFO, so there would be two additional competitive grant NOFOs. And funds not awarded from the native entity or U.S. territory set-asides will also be available in those future NOFOs. And so we've talked about funding, so let's talk about awards, the thing that everybody is interested in. Award amounts will range between $5 to $12 million. If it's outside of that range, that funding request must be explained in the application, and you need to be explicit as possible as why you need more or why you would need less than that amount. And awards for U.S. territories will not exceed $2.5 million. NTIA anticipates that these awards will be issued by winter of this year and no later than April 20th, 2025. And additional awards after that will be made on a rolling basis. They anticipate out of this funding amount, there will be about 150 to 200 total awards. And now that seems pretty small for the amount of funding that is available, but that's because partnerships are actively encouraged so that larger award amounts can be made. And so it's very, very important to be looking for partners now and aligning your goals with everybody so you can start creating applications. And so then, what's the purpose of the competitive grant program so we can start talking about the application? The purpose, as stated in the IIJA, is to support efforts to achieve digital equity, promote digital inclusion activities, and spur greater adoption of broadband among covered populations. And so what are the covered populations? As you can see there, covered populations include individuals and households under 150% of the poverty threshold, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, other than individuals in federal correctional facilities, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, which includes those that are English learners and those that have low levels of literacy, individuals who are members of a racial or ethnic minority group, and also individuals who primarily reside in a rural area. So technically, I'm part of a covered population because I live in rural Ohio. And so then who are the eligible organizations to apply for this funding? So eligible organizations include political subdivisions, agencies, or instrumentalities of the state. That includes public housing organizations, Indian tribes, Alaska Native entities, or Native Hawaiian entities, foundations, corporations, institutions, or associations that are nonprofits and are not a school, community anchor institutions, and the community anchor institution portion is where public schools are eligible as long as they are acting as a community anchor institution, which a majority of public schools do. Local education agencies are also eligible. Any organization running a workforce development program, partnerships between any of the above, and partnerships between any of the above in any entity that the Assistant Secretary says is in the public interest, but is not a school. Now, when it comes to Native entities and U.S. territories, they have slightly different eligibility requirements. And so U.S. territory governments can apply for funding underneath the U.S. territory set aside using the same application materials as under this NOVO, but they would be applying for that separate set aside. Organizations that are located in the U.S. territory, but not part of that territory's government, but they qualify as an eligible entity, can actually apply as part of that general pool of applicants because they qualify as that separate entity. And so, for example, think of like a nonprofit workforce development program in Pago Pago, American Samoa. They can apply for funds to create a digital skill building program. However, they would need to be applying as part of that general pool of applicants. So they would need to apply by September 23rd. And then organizations located in Native nations that don't qualify as a tribe, Native entity, or Native Hawaiian organization, but do qualify as an eligible entity, will also be considered in the general pool of applicants. Similar situation. There's a nonprofit that focuses on workforce development that's located in a Native nation but serves the general public. That organization would need to apply by September 23rd because they will be considered in the general pool of funds. And so then what are the eligible uses for this funding? Digital inclusion activities that benefit covered populations, broadband adoption for covered populations, which includes education and employment opportunities, training programs for basic, advanced, and applied skills. I do want to note here that this covers a range of training programs, so think about what that could look like for your specific community. Other digital inclusion workforce development programs, and then this one is lengthy, so I'll just read it as stated. Equipment, instrumentation, networking capability, hardware and software, or digital network technology for broadband services to covered populations at low or no cost. Create new or operate existing public computer centers for covered populations through community anchor institutions within your community, and any other project or activity that the Assistant Secretary gives the okay to. There is also eligible uses for reimbursement. And so up to $50,000, including expenses related to preparing the application, may be reimbursed. But it is important to note that if you started working on your application or doing work related to the grant program before July 24th, any funds spent on that cannot be reimbursed. They will only reimburse activities that occurred after the NOFO publication date of July 24th.
Ron, real quick.
Yes.
That's for folks who actually win a grant.
Correct.
Yeah, just making sure people know that. Okay.
Yes. In order to be reimbursed, you need to win that grant. That is the big kind of catch-22 of the grant world. You have to spend money in order to apply, but you only get reimbursed for that if you win. It's why there's so much like call for more technical assistance programs and technical assistance grants that don't cost a lot to apply for, and so that you have money to actually apply for those grants. But of course, this does not include lobbying and contingency fees because federal funds can't be used for those at all. The budget proposal must include those expenses that you want reimbursed, and it would need to be considered administrative costs, which means they do count towards that 10% cap of administrative expenses that's going to be talked about a little bit later. And then NDIA and the grant officers must approve those expenses in writing in order for them to be reimbursed. And again, right there at the bottom, it states, to get those things reimbursed, you have to receive the award. If you do not receive an award, you will not be reimbursed. So I'm going to pass it off to Shauna.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Let's see, do you want to go back one to the partners?
Oh, I didn't even think that it did that. 1 second.
Yep.
Come on. There we go.
Okay, so one of the things that NTIA really highlights in the NOFO is partnerships. Partnerships help expand the reach of this digital equity funding, and they're also key to applications with larger awards. So if you're going for a larger award, make sure that you're applying as part of a partnership. But there's some things to think about if you are applying through a partnership application. So you must be an eligible entity to be members of a partnership. That means everybody on the application needs to qualify as an eligible entity. And the application must be submitted by a lead entity acting as an authorized representative. So an organization may participate as a member of multiple partnerships as long as it is not the authorized representative for more than one application. However, an organization may only submit one application as either the solo applicant or an authorized representative for a partner application. So if you think about that, if you're doing solo, you're the applicant. If you're the authorized representative, you're the applicant, and you can only do either one of those things one time. But you can be a partner on other applications. Partnership applications must include a letter of commitment from each member's organization that authorizes the lead applicant to apply on their behalf, describe the scope of work for each partner and the allocation of funds for each partner organization, and indicate whether partners are listed on any other applications. For a partnership to be considered in the native entity pool of funding, the authorized representative must be a native entity, and the proposed digital equity activities must serve members of the native entity. However, other partners for that application could be any of the eligible entities. Okay, next slide, Ryan. The competitive grant program has a 10% match requirement, meaning the applicant needs to provide a minimum of 10% cash or in-kind services toward the total project's costs. However, NTIA may issue waivers based on financial need, and U.S. territories may not need to match depending on the size of the territory. So here are some things to keep in mind when you are considering matching funds. The match can be cash or in-kind. In-kind matches may include third-party contributions from organizations other than the applicant or partners. And in-kind contributions are non-cash donation of property, goods, or services that benefit the grant-supported goals. So they have to be something that is part of the budget plan for the grant. So this could include your employees and or volunteers' time spent on grant activities, equipment your organization owns or uses, such as vehicles, supplies, indirect costs, things that are necessary for the overall proposal, but not directly tied to a single project like office supplies, and computer hardware and software, and the use of your building, of the building your organization is located in. Like I said, your match must be part of your total project budget. So the match funds must be, or in-kind services, funds that help you implement your project. And you cannot use federal funds for the match. And applications with a higher than 20% match will receive additional consideration in the programmatic review as part of the selection process. So applications with a 10 to 20% match will not get extra points, but applications with a 20 to 29% match and a 30+% match will receive additional points accordingly. Okay, next slide. So what are you allowed to spend grant funds on? There's a 10% cap on evaluation, a 10% cap on administration, which includes direct and indirect funds, Previously awarded federal or state grant funds to create a digital equity plan or implement digital inclusion activities must be used before using the competitive grant funds. So the competitive grant funds can supplement, but not supplant previous funds. And then if the competitive grant funds are used to build up rather than replace other federal or state funded programs that implement the type of activities listed in the NOFO, the application must describe how the funds will not duplicate other funds. This is because NTIA is really going to want to make sure that they're not funding the same project more than once. So the clearer you can make that for them in your application, the better it's going to be. You cannot make a profit, charge fees, or include other incremental charges above the actual cost for the grant. And funds for this grant may not be used for general research or academic studies of digital equity. All right, next slide. That being said, you are required to measure and evaluate programs as part of your program plan. So you must use measurement and evaluation to show that you are meeting performance objectives and that the programs funded by the grant are successful. So this is different than general research because this is measurement and evaluation specific to the program. There are also required reporting requirements that include an annual report, evaluation report, financial reporting, performance technical report, and meeting guidelines for research on human subjects. You will also submit an overall assessment of the effectiveness of the program at the end of the period of performance. And NTIA may sponsor an evaluation of the entire program. So be prepared to participate in that if that is something they launch. Next slide. Okay, the NOFO talks about some key strategies NTIA will be looking for in the applications. They're really going to be looking for how your application enhances or supplements your state's digital equity plans. They will also be looking for innovative digital equity programs, programs that increase internet access and broadband adoption specific to the covered populations. They will want to see a geographic diversity of applicants. So state the area or the range that your proposal will cover. Is that a state? Beyond a state, is it a region? And also make sure to state that you are not duplicative or conflicting with other programs in that geographic area. Next slide. Some other strategies that NTA will be looking for in proposals is making sure that the competitive grant program is aligned with the Digital Equity Act. So proposals must support one of the following. Economic stability, which can include activities related to workforce development and employment opportunities, activities that increase access to quality education and healthcare, activities that increase social and civic engagement, and activities that demonstrate community access to the benefits of internet technology. Okay, next slide. So NTA really wants to see a focus on covered populations all throughout the NOFO as well as their webinar. They've really focused on centering the covered populations. So some of the things they're going to be looking for with a focus on those covered populations is proposals that enable long-lasting and meaningful change, applications that describe measurable implementation strategies, and ongoing community involvement throughout the grant period, and hopefully beyond. They're going to be really looking for proposals that include sustainability, as well as really working with the community in the proposal. Okay, next slide. Okay, the NOFO outlines really specific details for requirements for the application. I'm going to talk about just a few key things listed in the NOFO, but you're really going to need to make sure to read the full application details in the NOFO to make sure you're meeting all the requirements. So your application must explain the activities you plan to do, how those activities address barriers to digital equity and the covered populations that are supported by those activities. You need to have a timeline that details when and how those activities will happen. You will need to describe how the lead application is capable of managing the administrative grant duties. So has the lead organization or the authorized representative managed a large grant before, or a large budget with several partners? Show how you plan to have your activities continue beyond the grant period. Again, came back to sustainability. And disclose all other funds you are receiving for similar activities and how they are different from your proposed activities. All right, next slide. Talk about your measurement and evaluation strategy in the application in detail. Talk about the geographies to be served. Describe how your proposal aligns with the state digital equity plan or brings in new activities. And then you'll also need to fill out a standard consolidated budget form. NTIA has published all of the application materials on their website, so you can check those out in detail to see what's required on that form. And then all applicants, including partners and subgrantees, must have a unique entity identifier and register with sam.gov before applying. So start this now. I know if you've seen anything from NDIA, we keep saying that, but it's likely to get bogged down with this application process. So get started on that. Next slide. Okay, so specific to partnerships, there's a few additional application requirements. A statement of who will serve as the authorized representative, as well as evidence of their experience in managing similar partnerships or coalitions. You'll need to include a table listing all members of the partnership. It must include verification that they are all eligible entities and the category of eligibility for that entity, the scope of work and the role of each partner, the authorized representative for each other partner application. So meaning if your partners are applying for multiple application, who is the representative, authorized representative on those other applications, the allocation of funds among partners, and the contribution to the match among partners. So it's not expected that just one organization in the partnership is contributing to the whole match. If they are, just state that. If multiple organizations are contributing, you'll state that as well. And then you'll also need a letter of commitment from each partner. Okay, next slide. A few considerations for Native entity applications. They must include a tribal resolution authorizing them to apply for the competitive grant funds. And the Native entity applications will be considered the same way as other eligible entities for this NOFO. This is because they are considered an eligibility entity in the NOFO. However, they are awarded from the Native entity set-aside and will be funded until the Native entity set-aside is exhausted or there are no further Native entity applications. Okay, next slide. I think we can skip this one because I don't think anybody here is from a U.S. territory. Okay, how NTIA will score applications. There will be 3 stages in the scoring process. So the initial eligibility and administrative review. In this stage, NTIA will make sure the applicant is indeed an eligible entity, check that all application materials are complete, and verify that the application was submitted on time. So all the applications that meet these criteria will move on to the merit review. And then in this stage, NTIA will score the application based on evaluation factors. Applicants who score 70 or higher will move on to the next stage of review. And applicants who score 70 points or below will not receive funding. And you can look in the NOFO for the details on your application and how points are received. It's kind of too in-depth to go into today. And then the last stage of that, sorry, Ryan, the last stage of that is a programmatic review. In the final review stage, NTIA will group together proposals that score within a 5 to 10 point range, beginning with the highest scoring applications. And then applications will move through the remaining review steps in that prioritized grouping, and funding may be limited for each group. And then NTIA will move to the next group once it has completed the awards for the previous group. High scoring awards that weren't given in a grouping, those awards may be considered in the next grouping as well. So the review is also scored numerically based on factors noted in the NOFO, so check that out. So from there, NTIA will recommend a final list of applicants to the Assistant Secretary, who will act as the selecting official and submit a final award slate to the National Institute of Standards and Technology Grants Officer, who will then issue awards. And the decisions are final once the award has been made. All applicants will be notified in writing, I believe via email, if their application was successful or unsuccessful. And NTIA will allow unsuccessful applicants to request a debrief in their application. And the instructions for doing that should come in the notification from NTIA. All right, next slide. So some things to do now to get ready. Read the NOFO. Anybody, all applicants and sub-applicants really need to read the NOFO. We covered some basic things here. We also put out a blog post, which I'll throw in the chat, a link to cover it. But really, the NOFO contains so many details. It's just really essential that you read it. As mentioned earlier, NTIA has put out a great webinar series, 7 or 8 webinars so far that go into detail on each of the steps of the application requirements. So check that out as well. All applications must be submitted through the NTIA grants portal, which will open on August 14th. They have said that you can apply early and even encourage you to. But on, August 14th, I think I said 17th before. So on August 14th, if you want to see exactly what the materials are in there and links and other things for the materials, you can start looking then. NTIA is not responding to individual questions because this is a competitive grant. However, they will be updating their facts webpage regularly, I think weekly. So send any questions about this NOFO or the grant directly to NTIA, and you should see that update on their facts page. Make sure you qualify for the grant. Next slide, Brian. Again, make sure you're registered with SAM. Start engaging with stakeholders, and if you haven't identified those partnerships, do that now. Read your state digital equity plan if you haven't done that. NTIA also has a great technical assistance hub. You can start working on the application materials, and again, they're not going to be accepting late or incomplete applications, so make sure to get those in on time. I think that's all. So if we have time, we can take a few questions.
We can take a few questions, and also make sure if you aren't an affiliate, being an affiliate is completely free. So you can scan the QR code or go to our website, digitalinclusion.org, to join as an affiliate. And if you want to, excuse me, you can become an affiliate plus with us, which is just a small fee that we have on a sliding scale depending on the size of your organization.
All right, let me, this should be up, and we'll bring this over. Right before we get to questions, I do want to give a quick shout out to Andrew Marecki on our team. So thank you, Andrew, for your service. Today's your last day. Andrew was an AmeriCorps, American Connection Corps fellow in our office, member of our team over the last year, handled comms and stakeholder engagement. He worked really hard, learned quite a lot, graduated last week at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. So Andrew, if you want to take a moment real quick and come on screen and just say hello to the folks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Marecki. I'm the AmeriCorps member here at the office. You've probably seen my name sending out recap emails and stuff. So yeah, I just want to say that, this year was such a great experience for me, and it was so encouraging to see how many people in Arkansas were so dedicated to making our state a better place. So, keep fighting, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And again, thank you for your service this past year. Real quick, I think you have an interest in moving on to a nature-related calling, perhaps?
Oh, yeah. So my next thing is doing AmeriCorps Forest Corps. It's like a new program with the Forest Service that's, they do like trail management around the country. So that's what I'm going to next.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, with that, we'll go to discussion. We'll check the chat box first and see what we have. There were a couple of things. So Bob had asked about road trip details again in the slide deck. The county groupings are listed for you, along with the dates and times and cities of the meeting. We have the first 3 confirmed locations within those cities, but we will send out a Google registration form for all of the meetings next week. But with the slide deck, you'll be able to see where your county date and time is listed as part of the groupings that will come out with the communication following the meeting. Doss had asked, can there be more than one application from a state? Shauna, Ryan, I'm assuming the answer to that is yes.
So are you meaning per state, or are you mean like a state
Yes.
entity doing
Yes.
that?
Yes, they're saying like Arkansas doesn't get just one application in this process.
Oh, correct. Very much correct. They're not even going to be looking necessarily at the states that these are coming from, except to make sure that it like aligns with that digital equity plan. But as long as it's not the same entity applying as the lead applicant on multiple applications, there can be multiple applications for people.
Yeah. Okay, very good. And then would employment opportunities include online remote work? That's a very interesting question.
John, I'll let you take that one.
Okay. Yeah. So they do encourage economic development, workforce development programs, and there are not limitations as to listed in the NOFO as to what that looks like. So that I would suggest yes, that would include that. But again, I would also send that question directly to NTIA for specific clarification. But there's nothing limited workforce and employment to in-person services.
Yeah.
And I'll add on to that here in Ohio, there's a big focus on increasing remote workforce opportunities. And so based on that, I would also say yes, that this question does include access to remote work opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. And then let's see, Bob kind of commented about, the process is kind of bureaucratic and complicated and sort of who can work on it. That speaks to the importance of partnerships in this process, right? Because we know there's going to be certain entities that are not going to have the capacity needed to go through this process alone. And so that speaks to the power of partnerships and what NTIA wants, right? So hopefully we have 2, 3, 4, 5, right, or more perhaps entities that can come together in a group application, and you're all going to have strengths and weaknesses as an organization and help fill those gaps for each other, so it's not all on one entity to help get this thing across the finish line. Cam had linked to the NOFO for this particular grant opportunity, so that's available for folks in the chat. We'll also have all of these links available for you in the email communication that follows the meeting, along with the slide deck as well. Linked to the state's digital skills and opportunity plan. Shauna has put in the chat box NDIA's blog post with about the competitive grant program, so there's more information there for you. Ryan's noting that partner did AmeriCorps as well, and I'm also, not many people know this, but I was a Vista as well. Let's see. Andrew, getting some more shout outs from the folks. Hannah is asking, what recommendations do you have for identifying and working with partners on the competitive grant? We have a few in mind already at this stage, but would love to connect with organizations we might not be aware of. That's an interesting question. Shauna, Ryan, thoughts on that generally?
I think folks here probably in this call are a good place to start, like just start talking, networking. Your state plan should have identified state assets, so organizations already doing this work. You can look at who's on that, joining other digital inclusion coalitions, and also be thinking about the capacity for organizations to be able to do this work.
Yeah, Hannah, I mean, Shauna, just to follow up on that, you're right. In our digital skills and opportunity plan that the state put together, and I know it's 10:59, so I'm going to hang on for a little bit, even if we have time. If not, that's okay too, but I can be available for folks. Is that we did have a listing, so for each sort of programmatic piece of the program, below those we have listed out potential entities that could work on that particular issue. And so our planning document would be a good resource for folks to go and look at different organizations that could potentially serve as partners in this process. Scadolfo asked, can you say something about indirect costs? Are there any restrictions on indirect costs?
There are, so it's buried in the NOFO, but if you go to our blog post with indirect costs, there's a link to the document that will go into explicit detail as to what's covered for indirect costs.
Okay. And then Adam noted, let's see, is it clear in the NOFO that applicants would be able to use funding to hire digital navigators?
They don't explicitly state digital navigators, but that definitely falls into the scope of this NOFO, yes.
Correct. They talk about facilitating the adoption of broadband by covered populations, by providing educational employment, like to provide those opportunities, and implementing training programs. And if digital navigators are needed to do those things, you just have to justify why you need the digital navigator within that grant application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, one of the sort of strengths and weaknesses I look at as the strength, in the state of Arkansas, 87.4% of our population is a covered population. So huge opportunity. You can literally almost put any program forward and you're going to touch a lot of folks that are covered. So it's an opportunity for the state of Arkansas. Wrapping quickly, Dante said, must have missed it, but who's replacing Drew on sending out links and slides? We have two folks we're actually trying to get. So we had Andrew, was great this year. We hope to have two this next year. So we're going from 1 to 2 AmeriCorps fellows. And so they would start in September, but we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's for that. And we would introduce those folks once on board. And okay, one quick one, is there a definition somewhere for a digital navigator?
Yeah, we actually have definitions on the NDIA website for digital navigator. Let me see, or Ryan, if you're looking for that one. Yeah, Ryan will throw it in the chat for you.
Very good, very good. So we'll look at that. So for the folks, it's 11:02. I can hang on for a little bit longer if folks need to go. That's okay. We'll thank Shauna and Ryan for joining us today and agreeing to present for this crew. I think there is, Shauna, if you want to, or Ryan, if you want to put in the chat box the link to the 12 o'clock. You're having a webinar today, correct, as well?
We are, yeah. Let me find that.
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah, probably a lot of
I was already on the website grabbing the definitions. So.
Yeah. Probably a lot of the same information, but if folks want a refresher real quick, there's an NDIA webinar at 12 p.m. that you can attend, and the link has been put into the chat box as well, along with definitions, which would include digital navigators. And so again, I'll hang on just a little bit, but thanks Ryan, thanks Shauna for doing this today. Very much appreciate it. and anybody else needs to go, that's fine, but I'll hang on for just a little longer, and our team will, just in case.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
And for those folks still hanging on, in our follow-up communication to this presentation, we're going to include the PowerPoint deck along with the links that have been posted in the chat and were referenced today. So you'll get all of that in the follow-up communication that comes from us today. All right, with that, thanks for attending today, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.